The following production is part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network.
Turkeys, and welcome to Board with Video Games, the gaming podcast that strives for the right balance of coverage for games you play on your table and on your television. You can think of us as the turkey and stuffing of gaming podcasts. We're a proud member of the PSVG Podcast Network. I am one of your hosts, Kyle, and joining me on this co-op adventure, the guy who knows the proper way to cook stuffing is outside of the turkey. Josh, how are you doing this week?
I'm glad to get two controversial statements right off the bat, calling our listeners turkeys and saying you cook stuffing on the outside of a turkey.
Whoa, number one, I asked turkeys because we're not talking about games playing this week, and it's Thanksgiving is the day this game is releasing for those of you who are in the U.S., so I thought it was appropriate. Number two, it is not controversial to talk about cooking stuffing on the outside of the turkey. It is the correct way.
I think it's controversial. I'm not picking a side because you're like asking me. I'm picking a side on this one. It's I don't know what it's like where you live, but where I live, the stuffing's cooked inside the turkey.
Well, where you live does it wrong, Josh. I'm just going to say it. That is not the correct way to do it. It means that the turkey's going to be dry by the time the stuffing is done. Like, no.
Some people would argue you must be cooking your turkey wrong. I'm not one of those people.
How do you cook your turkey then, sir?
No comment. This is a hot topic. You would think out of all the things I weigh in on, this wouldn't be so controversial, but however you cook your turkey and your stuffing, I 100% support your decision to do it that way.
I mean, true. Okay, do you brine your turkey?
I'm no Kevin Warner or Justin Austin, so I'm not sure the correct way. I've eaten brined turkey. I've eaten it not brined. I've eaten it deep fried. I've eaten it lots of different ways. My favorite way to have turkey is deep fried, but that's not on Thanksgiving. That's like Super Bowl Sunday.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, a fried turkey is good. I'm telling you, though, if you have an excellent brine turkey, like that is kind of the best way to make a turkey.
I bet if I had it, I'm sure there is a way a turkey has been prepared that I haven't tried yet that is fantastic.
Oh,
I'm
probably.
a big fan of turkey in general, so I like it anyway.
Okay. So here we'll go with another potential controversial question in the spirit of Thanksgiving, the day this episode releases. What is the most average Thanksgiving food?
Average, like
meaning, so when you think of average,
people have?
No, in the sense of like half the food that is often at Thanksgiving is worse than it, and the other half is better than it. What is the most average Thanksgiving food?
Mashed potatoes. I
feel like that has to be the answer, right?
I think so. It has to be. Or like cranberry sauce might be like right on that line.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like mashed potatoes is kind of like that, like middle of the road. Like they're good. They're always, hopefully, ideally, like good.
Steamed carrots or like boiled carrots or something like that. I don't know if a lot of people have that. What we do.
Gotcha.
So maybe carrots as well.
So one last Thanksgiving question, and then we'll get actually talking about games. You mentioned cranberries. Are you a fresh cranberry person or a jelly cranberry person?
So I live in Massachusetts. So if I said to you that I didn't like fresh cranberries, you might find me like hanging from my flagpole tomorrow morning.
Well, it's not quite Wisconsin.
It's not quite cheese in Wisconsin, but I mean...
No, like Wisconsin is, I think, the number one cranberry state, isn't it? Isn't it just ahead of you guys? They have the most cranberry bogs?
That would be shocking to me, but I'm sure it's possible. But I mean, Massachusetts is known for its cranberries, so... I don't like cranberry jelly.
Oh, really?
I don't enjoy it at all. I know I'm in the minority in that topic. So I'm all fresh cranberries. But if I'm having cranberries, it's not really on Thanksgiving unless it's like a pie. But I'm not having.
Oh.
I'm not having like the jelly cranberry with my meals. But that's for me. I have a consistency issue.
That's reasonable.
People might feel with me like I can't eat pudding because it looks solid, but it is not. So I have some issues going on in my brain.
Hey, consistency
How about
and
you? Are
texture.
you a cranberry guy?
Consistency and texture is a big deal. I totally understand. And, for how snobby I am about food, and I like fresh cranberries, I don't know what it is. I think it might just be like nostalgia and growing up with it. I love jellied cranberries. Like when they come out of the can and they're still the same shape as the can. I don't know what it is about them. I just love them. And I know like everything that is a food snob about me like cringes, but I just love them.
It's okay. You're allowed to have guilty pleasure foods.
So anyway, but hey, this isn't a Thanksgiving podcast. This is a gaming podcast. So thanks so much for joining us this week. As always, if you have any feedback, questions, suggested topics, hit us up at BoardWithVG on Twitter. Also check out all the stuff that Josh is posting over on Instagram, also at BoardWithVG. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/BoardWithVG. So we'd love for you to give us a 5-star rating over there. And if you want to communicate long form, we take emails, boardwithvg@gmail.com. You can also use that hashtag boardwithvg, so original, on all the social medias to help us know what you're playing, what you're doing, kind of what you are up to. And if you are listening to us on the PSVG podcast feed, just a reminder that Board with Video Games has its own podcast feed as well. So if you want to be a little selective about your listening, you can do that and choose to listen to us individually, though all the podcasts on PSVG are quite excellent. So that's enough of the housekeeping. Josh, it's a news week. So what's been some of the hot news in the board game world, sir?
Oh, well, nothing big, just another giant Kickstarter hits our faces. So another big video game franchise is headed to the tabletop. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice is currently on Kickstarter. It's being published by Triton Noir. The game is a cooperative mission-based tactical board game for 1 to 4 players. That's right. Cooperative and mission-based tactical board game. That is what it is. According to the Kickstarter, the campaign should last more than 20 hours. And all this can be yours for a low, low price of $119. And you'll get it likely sometime in 2020. What do we think about this Assassin's Creed board game, Kyle?
Did you play Assassin's Creed Arena? That was the other one, right? Was that the other?
It was the other one. And you know what? I didn't know it existed until recently. Saw some people selling it on like a board game reselling group I'm part of on Facebook, and it immediately piqued my interest, but I don't know much about it because I didn't know it was a thing until recently. Yeah,
so it was published by Cryptozoic, if I recall, back in the day, and if I remember, I could be wrong, I don't think it was very good. I think it was looked pretty poorly upon it. I don't think there was a lot of fans of that game. And I never had a chance to play it, but the reviews for it were pretty mixed, so I never decided to really seek it out or take the time. And, when this game was announced and I saw the Kickstarter for this, Brotherhood of Venice game, I was pretty excited about it. I was like, an Assassin's Creed game. I'm really enjoying playing. Looking forward to jumping back into this world and experiencing Assassin's Creed, especially because they're going back to Venice. Ezio is in the game, I believe, is that there's a miniature for Ezio. So really kind of was like excited about this. And then I saw the price. And again, I was like, $120. Now, I will say, there's a ton of stuff in this box. For the $120, you are getting a ton of things. So it's hard for me to say that it's not worth the price because there's a lot of cool stuff in there. It seems to have some sort of almost, I don't want to say legacy aspect, but there's definitely a campaign to it. For like every campaign, like you open a new envelope and you pull out additional cards and other things that you add to the game that aren't in there. There's like a 10-inch Assassin's Tower that comes in the game that's pretty sweet looking. Like there's a lot of things that are in there, but $120 for a game that I'm going to get 2 years from now with, again, a game printed by a different company but with the same IP that was overall pretty universally panned. Do I want to take this risk? And I just can't decide. If it wasn't November and the holidays were right around the corner, I might be a little more willing to jump in, but I have a lot of places to spend $120 right now, and I don't know if this game is the place to spend $120. How about you, sir?
So, obviously the Assassin's Creed IP interests me a lot. And the game itself looks, the pieces obviously look great. It's another miniatures game, but this is the problem I have. It's not the $119 at this point. Unfortunately, it's kind of becoming normal for most Kickstarters. I think the problem I have with this, and it's not Assassin's Creed or Triton Noir, it's that we've had all these big IPs on Kickstarter and we haven't seen any of them yet. And that's starting to give me hesitation and maybe have some worry, because we're just in that middle point where people have backed games almost as far as a year and a half ago, and we still haven't seen those games, but more games keep coming out. And when I say out, I don't mean out, I mean available to back. So now I'm kind of getting into this point of blind backing, because there's no proof of concept or proof of design that I've seen people be able to show off for games specifically like this, like the Batman game from Monolith, the Harry Potter game. The Harry Potter game, the miniatures one, I'm already seeing it heavily discounted places, but I've not seen it in anyone's hands. So these are things that are worrying me. So I think for now, for like video game IPs or even films like this, I think I'm going to have to stay away from Kickstarters just for my own peace of mind for right now. I'm just feeling a little weary about them.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, there are 117 miniatures in this game.
Yes.
That's a lot, right? And that's as of right now. As the Kickstarter keeps going on, I think it's a little over $500,000 right now. As they have a number of stretch goals still to unlock more. But I think, again, this is one of those games that's out on Kickstarter. It's $120 for the base box. There's already a $50 expansion you can buy if you want to. So now you're into for $170, and then there's like an alternate miniature Ezio. That's another like $7 or $8. So there's all these other things that you can already buy. So it's already like, oh, if I buy the game, not even so much like video games that are like, oh, buy the season pass and in 3 months you'll get this thing. It's day one, you already don't have all the content for the game.
Right, exactly.
And I get why they do it, because I'm sure that this keeps the base price of the game as low as it can be in a lot of ways, because how much more difficult would it be to swallow to be like, oh yeah, the entry level price is $170. Right,
exactly. And who wants to get a game and get all the expansions at the same time and you don't play the base game?
Right.
I get so Fireball Island people are just starting to get, and I know that it comes with expansions in it, and I think that's great that people get those things, but I don't want to buy a game and immediately buy expansions for it, because then I'm never experiencing the game as it was. So, and that's just a me thing. Like when I got Ascension, when we talked about me buying all the Ascension expansions in a couple episodes back. Like, yeah, I was super psyched to get those cards, but I also played the base game a bunch, and I was like, yeah, this is a game I want more cards for. Like Guardians, yeah, I can't wait for more characters to come out. But if we bought Guardians day one and had 2 expansion packs with it, like, that's fine, but how is that altering your view of the game, I wonder? Right. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but for me, I don't necessarily want to back a game on Kickstarter. And then, like, I'm seeing all these people get these games in recently from Kickstarter, like Village Attacks, and it comes with like 50 boxes. And you're like, gee, I'm exaggerating, but it's like 15 boxes, and you're like, which one's the base game? What do? Do you play the base game? Do you include them all at the same time? So I think, like, while Kickstarter is obviously thriving, I think it's getting like ahead of itself content-wise. At least the creators are.
Right.
But that's not an Assassin's Creed knock. That's just a observation I'm making off of it already coming with an expansion you can buy.
Right. So
I
think
you don't know if it's good or not.
Right. So I think, both of us obviously both really enjoy Horizon Zero Dawn. If you ever see the videos that I know we don't typically post the actual video of us recording, but like we both have Horizon Zero Dawn artwork in the background. Yes. Both of us backed out on that board game.
Yeah, it was too much.
I think if I had to venture a guess, I know I like Assassin's Creed. I feel like you're an Assassin's Creed fan to a degree as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think either one of us is going to back this game?
This is the thing. This is the Assassin's Creed that was my bread and butter. The first 3 Assassin's Creed games, those games I love the most because for me that gives me my linear storyline that I like so much. So like this is right up my alley. But yeah, I can't back and I can't back this for a lot of reasons. But I mean, I'm going to PAX next week. I'm fun. I'm already for 35. Want to spend $35 I could be spending elsewhere. So,
right.
If it was a different time of the year, I might be more interested in it. But right now, I can't even give it a second thought. It's an absolute no for me right away.
Yeah, which I think is unfortunate, just because time of the year. Like, I think, do you think? I mean, this is only partially related. Do you think we're hitting a point where are we getting oversaturated with these games at these prices? I keep thinking we are, but then they keep funding, right? Like. This one's at $500,000. They're not at multiple, $2 million like Fireball Island was, but they're well over $500,000. Are we hitting do you think we're ever going to hit a point? Are we eventually going to hit that saturation point where there's just too many expensive games and that the market just isn't big enough to handle it?
I think we have to, unless like billionaires are secretly board game fans. Cause like, I don't know where all the money's coming from. I really don't. Clearly this is, touching on how understated the board gaming audience is. Like, we think there's gamers. I think that's what Kickstarter's proving to us is there's a much larger fan base out there that aren't as vocal.
Right.
Whether that's from like guilt and shame or just they don't want to admit like that they're board game players and they're still stuck in the like 80s, 90s D&D like stereotype, or if it's just people that are like us that are picking and choosing games to back and not back. So like we passed on Horizon Zero Dawn, so maybe the reason why Horizon Zero Dawn was successful is because those people passed on Kingdom Death Monster before that. So like that could be it too, but eventually, like right now, there's nothing stopping a company from trying to gobble up an IP and make a board game out of it because they're all being successfully funded. But eventually there will be too many IPs out at the same time and something will not get funded. And then everyone will take a step back to make sure they're making a wiser decision. Not that these decisions aren't wise, but all it takes is a Bubsy IP or Earthworm Jim game to make someone like realize they backed an IP just because they thought they could get the game made, not necessarily because they were passionate about it.
Right.
And it was more of a money move. So I think we'll hit that threshold at some point.
Yeah, I do. I always have to remind myself too, though, that the board game industry is very different than the video game industry. I'm still waiting for my Fireball Island shipping notification. I still haven't gotten it. I see all these people taking pictures of their unboxings, and I'm like, well, maybe someday. Granted, they said when we got the initial thing saying shipping has started, they said it would take up to 2 weeks, and it's been a little over a week at this point. So I'm trying to not be impatient, but I'm clearly failing. But I think about that game, which was a quote-unquote huge success, and it sold 16,000 copies on Kickstarter, or at least 16,000 copies in the United States.
But that's like based on an existing... That's like a nostalgia buy.
Right. And think about a video game being like, yeah, it was a huge success at selling 16,000 copies.
Right.
Like that would be...
That's nothing.
That's nothing. So I think that's the thing I have to always think about of like, yes, this Assassin's Creed game I think is... just shy of 5,000 people have backed it. So it's not like you have to find 5 million people to buy these things all the time. It's a very small group of people that you're trying to find buy these all the time to get them funded to be made. And the teams that make these games are not huge. You don't have 60, 80, 100, 180 person teams who are making board games. You have in a bigger studio, 12 people, 20 people. Yeah. Most of them are a handful, 5, 6 people. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, hey, that's all about Assassin's Creed. I would love to know if any of the listeners are excited or have backed this game. I'd really love to know why and kind of what pushed them over the edge. So if you are interested or if you have backed it, hit us up at Board of VG. Let us know. Great.
Well, let's continue some board game news. This one has me particularly excited, and I'm not even really sure why, but so while Triton Noir is pushing a video game IP hitting the table, folks over at Asmodee hope you are interested in a different type of IP coming to Target exclusively, and that is Black Mirror Nosedive. And that's hitting shelves Sunday, November 25th, right? That's Sunday? I hope so. Yeah, it must be. Because I'm sure, just like Villainous, I'll show up to Target on Sunday and it will not be on the shelf. It'll also be interesting. That's hitting on Black Friday weekend. So There will be chaos ensuing. We'll see if it hits the shelf early or at all.
Right. And you are correct. It is Sunday.
Okay. So, and based on the popular episode of the show that shares the same name of Nosedive, we know almost nothing about the game, and other than a very brief description from Asmodee, which reads, modeled after the iconic Black Mirror episode of the same name starring Bryce Dallas Howard, in Nosedive, players are challenged to create a perfect life by collecting lifestyle cards while avoiding any, quote, dings to their social score. Integrated with the free Nosedive smartphone app, available on iOS and Android, the game includes over 1,000 unique experiences to impress players' important friends and improve their social standing. Nosedive features light social and strategic gameplay that is engaging, interactive, and accessible for new players. So that's what we know. The game is out 5 days from this recording. I'll tell you a little synopsis of the episode, as I'm a huge Black Mirror fan. Essentially, Bryce Dallas Howard is a woman living in a world of social media where they use this program that is Instagram, essentially, and you are rated as a person based off of the pictures you take. And if the food looks good that you're eating, you get a bump. If you're polite and hold the door open for someone, you get a bump. If you're familiar with Good Place, there's an episode very similar where Eleanor has to increase her score. It's very similar to that. Bryce Dallas Howard's character starts going on a nosedive in her score and tries to come out of it. Alice Eve is also in it. She was in Star Trek, and She's Out of My League, which was a very funny movie. I enjoyed the episode. My buddy does not, because he finds it annoying, which I can totally see if you are annoyed by social media. So the question to us and to you, Kyle, first is, are you excited about Black Mirror Nosedive, and do you want more Black Mirror games?
So I'm a really bad nerd. I've watched like 3 episodes of Black Mirror in my entire life. I like it. I just have never gotten around back to it, basically. So I've not seen this particular episode. But I do like Bryce Dallas Howard, so it's piqued my interest in it a little bit more. I think I will say, moderately interested in this game, mostly because it comes out in 5 days and we have no idea what it is. We have no, as far as I know, from when I looked earlier in the day on Board Game Geek at it, and from when I looked at Asmodee's website, I have no idea who designed it. I don't really know exactly what you do in the game. I kind of know what it looks like because there's a couple pictures, and the game is out Sunday. Like, we know almost nothing about this game, and it seems like they're banking 100% on people being like, I really like that episode of Black Mirror. Let's buy this game.
Yeah.
And I don't know that much about this episode of Black Mirror, so I don't know if I'm going to buy this game. I will say, I think it's interesting that they are doing an entire game based off of one episode of a show, which
yes.
Usually when you see games about an IP, it's about like the world or and obviously that doesn't totally work for Black Mirror, but it's about, everything that has been created in that universe. And this is like, no, we're going to make a whole game based off of one episode of one show. And I find that to be a little interesting. And it makes me wonder if we're going to get more Black Mirror games, especially since this is very clearly labeled as Black Mirror: Nosedive.
Yeah, I mean, It's interesting because I've been racking my brain on Black Mirror episodes, and I don't know how you could make other episodes a board game, but I would also never have thought this would be a board game.
I could tell you, I can come up with some ideas about some decisions you have to make with a pig.
Yes, yeah. That's also it should be noted that this is ages 13 plus. It's 3 to 6 players.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's kind of a bummer because I did not realize that.
That is a bummer. That immediately makes me way less interested, which is unfortunate for every 3-player game ever, but the chances of me buying it are so much less.
But you can, if you look at this picture, you can like zoom in on the cards.
Mm-hmm.
So because people can hear my clicking. But there's cards like a creaky bunk bed, 2 stars, an autonomous robot dog, 3 stars, an inspirational poster taped to your cubicle, 2 stars, double damage, all negative rankings count 2 times. So it's definitely playing on the score aspect of the episode. It's a small box, so I'm going to go ahead and guess this is $20 or under game, which would be more appealing to me, and I would certainly pick it up, even though it's 3 to 6 players, if it's $20 or under.
Right.
Because basically, I would just have people come over, watch the episode, and then play the game, for people who haven't seen the episode.
Right.
Or I might play the game with my wife and then have her watch the episode after. I think it's great. I think we kind of just talked about the downfalls of like Kickstarter and like Assassin's Creed being an IP in there now, but I also think it's a great time where we are in a time where they can put a game out like this. Mm-hmm. And people who don't know Black Mirror, they're just going to look at this and be like, what am I looking at? Are they going to buy it? Who knows? But this kind of speaks to Target's commitment to board games.
Absolutely.
As well as Asmodee showing that with all this power they have and all these companies they're eating up, that they're still willing to take risks on games that may not pay off. So I like that too. I think it speaks a lot more about Target and Asmodee than it necessarily does about what this game is going to be.
Gotcha. Any other thoughts about Black Mirror Nosedive?
No, I mean, go check out the episode. Let us know if you find it annoying, or if you thought I had sympathy for the character. My friend found her incredibly annoying, which I can also see. But if you've seen it, let us know what you think. If you haven't, go watch it.
And I will say, as a brief callback to a earlier episode a while ago, I finished the 2 seasons of The Good Place that are on Netflix, and it got much better. I did start finding it funny, and I would just like to say, because I don't think I said this on air, but maybe I did, I totally called it.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say I should be a TV exec or anything, but I should be a TV exec or something.
You did call it. You did say it on the episode we were talking about what you thought was going to happen.
Oh,
did you start watching season 3 on Hulu?
I have not started watching season 3 yet. No.
Okay.
I started watching Dogs on Netflix.
I've heard emotional things, so I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I cried like 4 times in the first 30 minutes of the first episode. It was great. But hey, you know what? We'll talk about the well-rounded life stuff later. Let's move on to some video game news. So, while the rumors and speculation about the next generation of consoles are starting to heat up, it looks like Xbox isn't quite done with revisions of their current console family. According to Thurrott, Microsoft will be releasing a version of the Xbox One without a disk drive next year in order to help lower the cost of entry and get the regular price of the console below the $200 mark. Included with this, according to Thurrott, will be a disc-to-digital program where you can go to participating retailers, trade in the disc version of your game, and get a download code for it. Josh, are you excited about an Xbox One without a disc drive? I
don't know that excited would be the word I would use. I think it's cool that they're offering the digital version for a physical copy, because that's a very nice thing to offer.
We feel like that's probably only going to happen at Microsoft stores, right? Like, you're not going to be able to go into GameStop and do this.
Probably not, right? GameStop, but maybe Best Buy or Target or Walmart. Someone who doesn't thrive on pre-owns. Mm-hmm. But definitely not GameStop. I don't think. I'd be shocked. I think we talk about this a lot on our show. This is the way that Microsoft is going and they've wanted to go. I think this is a great idea because this is going to ease people into the next generation of consoles. We're still in this area of people not wanting to part with physical games. Myself being one of those people who had a hard time doing that. I'm not going to buy another Xbox without a disc drive because I use my 4K Blu-ray player, and the last thing I want them to do is go the route of the HDD drive they did for the 360, which was a waste of my money that I bought. So there's obviously negatives without a disc drive. You don't have the access to a Blu-ray player. You don't have access to a physical game if Xbox Live is down. There's definitely some drawbacks. But I think it's smart of them to make an affordable console for people and make it a little bit easier for that transition from physical to digital, in my opinion. I think I hope it's a smart move for them, but I think it's the logical next move, regardless of next gen or current gen.
Right. I think this is an interesting move that I think overall is good. I think it just shows Xbox continuing to diversify and offer their customers and their fan base a console that will fit what their needs are. I do wonder a little bit about who that currently already has an Xbox would switch to this, unless maybe your Xbox, you've had it since launch and it kind of craps out and you want to save some money knowing that Scarlet is probably in 2020. So maybe you go this route instead, because I'm trying to think I think it's very cool that they're going to, according to this, do the disc to digital thing. I think that's cool that they're going to do that, but I'm just wondering how many people are really going to be taking advantage of that, are going to be like, oh, I'm going to get rid of my Xbox that has a 4K Blu-ray player drive in it, right, which we talked about how stupid PlayStation was for not having one of those. But now I'm going to go get rid of it completely.
Yeah.
And go totally digital. I don't know exactly how many people are going to do that. So I think you're right. I feel like this is potentially more geared towards those who are coming, maybe just starting into this generation, or those who, if they get an Xbox in 2019 and then a new one is announced for 2020, they didn't spend so much on it, so it doesn't feel like such a big deal. And I really am curious to see how this disc to digital is going to work. I think of and I know he wouldn't do this, but if Coach Mo walked into a store with his entire physical game collection for Xbox One, are they just going to give him codes for all the hundreds of games he has?
No, I'm sure. Yeah, it'll be on specific titles. I'm sure.
And that's kind of more what I'm curious about is how exactly that's going to work. I think it's cool. I think it's really great that they're doing it. I just rather want to go to the logistics of trying to do that. And do you have every game available? What if it's some random small game? What if it's a limited run? Well, they don't usually do PlayStation or Xbox games for that, but what if it's a small run, of games and things like that? Kind of what are the restrictions that are around that? Is it literally everything? But overall, I think this is cool. I think this is Xbox continuing to redefine how, they want their ecosystem to be when it comes to gaming. And I think this is just one more step towards the future, like you said. So I think overall, it's pretty cool. What would it take for you to get one of these? I know you said you're not planning on it, but what would the situation have to be where you'd see yourself jumping in, at a, $199.99 Xbox One X or Xbox One, excuse me? I
mean, maybe if I wanted a console for the bedroom, or if my son was older, for his room. But immediately I think of Seth from the PSXP podcast.
Yeah.
Because Seth is very interested in EA Access
and Game Pass.
And this is great for people who haven't jumped on Xbox because of the price point. And Game Pass is still doing great things, and EA Access is still doing decent things. So I think for someone who's just looking to go digital and subscription based, great price point. And I don't think $199 is competitive enough. I think it has to be $150. Just because you can get an Xbox One S for $199 now at this point, on sales and stuff.
Right, yeah.
So I think if they were looking at $149, I think that's incredibly appealing to anyone who doesn't have an Xbox yet. And then there's obviously people like Coach Mo who are Xbox enthusiasts who will probably have it just to have an Xbox their next, in between console, but
he needs to add one to his kitchen television so he gets
yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll put one in my bathroom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely see the appeal. I think that Microsoft, it'll be interesting because if you're a Microsoft family that with 3 Xbox consoles, your family plan only covers you with 2 consoles. So they're kind of limiting their fan base on how many consoles they can get if they want to keep all their games.
And maybe that'll change. They've been very forward thinking about those things and the things that they've been doing with it. So maybe that'll change. Maybe the family plan will increase or the number of consoles you can share on will go up. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, that's Xbox still doing their thing, still pushing the envelope and thinking about things differently and kind of reinventing the way that they are, playing in the game area. Another kind of out of left field announcement of the year happened just recently with PlayStation announcing they're skipping E3 in 2019 completely. No press conference, no floor presence, no offsite thing close to but not connected to E3 that is at the same time as E3. Sony said in their statement that, quote, as the industry evolves, Sony Interactive Entertainment continues to look for inventive opportunities to engage the community. PlayStation fans mean the world to us, and we always want to innovate, think differently, and experiment with new ways to delight gamers. As a result, we have decided not to participate in E3 2019. We're exploring new and familiar ways to engage our community in 2019 and can't wait to share our plans with you, end quote. So, Josh, after 24 years of doing E3, at the very first E3, they announced the PlayStation and the price and the launch, I think, of PlayStation. They're now opting out. Is this a big deal? What does this mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal no matter which side you're on this. It's a big deal because E3 has been like in the death spiral in the past like 6 or 7 years. You see more and more people pulling out or more and more companies doing things off-site. They, if you were part of the public, you couldn't go, and then you could go, and then you couldn't go again, and you could go again. I mean, they've been all over the place with who's allowed to go. Yeah, I mean, I had thoughts on it. Originally, my thoughts were shock and what a big mistake this is for Sony to be doing this. And then, obviously with our Discord, which is open for people to join, we talked about it a lot. And I think I started to come around more on, once you have to take more time to think about the decision they made and maybe why they made it. I think someone in the Discord said, and I don't remember who it was, they basically said like Sony had like the biggest year of the PlayStation last year. And they don't really have too much to announce at the next E3 that we don't already know about. So why would they waste resources and money and time to disappoint the hardcore fan base or the people expecting to see all this new announcements? Like we kind of saw that happen at this year's E3, right? People were really down on their press conference. People, there were positives too. People did enjoy it, but I think the majority of the voices were negative.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed a little bit of this and that, but they didn't really blow people away with game announcements, which is fine. Like that was their agenda. That's their prerogative. But maybe if you're Sony and you listen to that feedback, you say, you know what, who am I out to impress? We had the best year of our lives. Like we don't have to impress people. We have the fan base. They're here for us. They trust Sony to put out good quality content. We don't need to go to E3. I think that the biggest loss is for E3, not for Sony. And unfortunately, when you say it's a loss for E3, you're also saying it's a loss for the fans, the people who are paying thousands of dollars to travel to California to go experience Sony. Because, you don't really get till last year. Nintendo wasn't really there. They finally came back and made a presence on the show floor last year, or this year, I should say. So you're, I don't know. I'm not saying they're alienating their audience, but they're taking away Sony from people who may have wanted to go there and experience Sony. Yeah.
I think a couple things. Now, obviously, I am the resident PlayStation fanboy on the podcast. Mm-hmm. So I am going to try to be measured in what I say because I don't want this to come off as everything I'm saying is glowing. I think this is a huge risk. And I think the reason this is a huge risk is To be clear, I love E3. I think E3 is a great, fun time. I take time off of work for E3, and I watch the press conferences when they happen. And then when the press conferences are over and E3 actually starts, I watch the live streams of like the developers coming in and talking for 20 minutes about their games. And then they get another one from another one. Like, I take time off of work to do that because I enjoy it. And when I'm doing that, I am watching the PlayStation stream of it. I am not watching the IGN or the GameSpot or any of those other ones. I watch the PlayStation stream because that's where the ecosystem that I live in. There is concern, obviously, that this is the hubris of the end of the PlayStation 2 era, beginning of the PlayStation 3 era, going, we don't need E3 to be successful. I don't totally think that's what this is, though. I think very much what this is that Sony knows that in 2020, they're going to launch a new console. They are also trying to figure out when they're going to, in that year, launch that console and how they're going to market that console. I would suspect that this means that sometime next summer, we are going to get an individual standalone PlayStation event announcing the PlayStation 5. And they don't want to do that at E3 because at E3, they will own that news cycle for that night, and that is it. And they want the next week plus to everyone be talking about the PlayStation 5 event of whenever that is. End of June, middle of July, August, May, whenever it is. So I think that's why they're not going to E3 is because when they come out, they're coming out saying, hey, this is what we're talking about in the summer is we're announcing the PlayStation 5. And we're going to give you a brief glimpse at a couple things coming. And then in December, they're going to do PSX again. They're going to go back to PSX. And they're going to blow out, here's the stuff that all the games you're going to be playing in launch window for PlayStation 5. And I suspect, I could be wrong, but I feel like maybe PlayStation 5 is coming early 2020, not holiday 2020.
Like March.
Yeah, like similar to what Switch did. Because if that wasn't true, then this seems a little weird because otherwise you could push everything back like you did before when PlayStation 4 launched and you could hold your event in, even at PSX, you could do it in PSX of 2019 for a holiday 2020 release. So that's why I feel like I don't think you want that year and a half or a year, like 14-month cycle. I think they're really shooting for, closer to like a 8-month cycle of news for that. So I kind of feel like that's maybe why they're doing this. And I think there is a situation, like you said, that they spent millions of dollars, I'm sure, last year to do their presentation. And then people were like, well, that was dumb. So do they really want to spend millions of dollars again to show the same games because they don't want to share the PS5 to share the spotlight and have everyone be like, well, that was dumb again? Right. I don't know. Obviously, I have no, I am just purely speculating. But I feel kind of like what they're shooting for. I hope that, Xbox comes out and has a killer E3. I hope Nintendo comes out and has a killer E3 and the third parties come out and do great things. I am more interested to see what this means for PlayStation because they said in August that, or maybe it was early September, they came out and said, hey, we realize we haven't been communicating in a way that has been effective and that you don't feel like you've been hearing from us. We are looking to change that. And since then, the crossplay thing has happened. The name change thing, for no matter how messed up that is, has happened. These things are starting to happen. Sean Landis has been on the PlayStation Blogcast multiple times since then. They're starting to talk more than they were the previous 2 years. So I'm hoping that we're going to see more Nintendo Direct, Xbox. What do they call them? Their presentations?
I always forget because
but they're like little 2 hour presentations they do like once a month or every other month.
Inside Xbox.
Thank you, Inside Xbox. I feel like we're going to start getting more of that from PlayStation moving forward, and that they're going to start doing more speaking directly to the fans, not through the media to the fans. And while I think people are saying, oh, it looks like they're abandoning their fans, I think this is actually them trying to connect directly with them rather than going through a press conference that is meant for, it's still, E3 is still a buying conference, like, hey, look how cool our games are. You should order a whole bunch of them. Yes, fans can go now, but it's still very much that. So I feel like that's hopefully what I speculate they're trying to do. But if that's not how it goes, I will gladly call them on their crap in a year if we sitting here a year from now and none of that has happened. I will be glad to call them out on it. More than anything, I'm interested to see what this means for them. And that's, to me, why I like it. because it interests me. I'm really curious now what they're going to do.
That's the right attitude to have. Everyone is so quick to make snap judgments now. They immediately want to, like you said it, like immediately they want to blame Sony. You're giving up on your fans from get-go. Like, stop. Be curious. See where this is leading. You don't need to, like, they're a corporation. They have to make financial decisions as well. It's not like some guy just sitting in an office snapping his fingers like, bring me the shrimp and cancel E3. I want this. I want that. Like, that's not how these things operate. There's a board of people who sit down. They go, someone says, what do you think about skipping E3 this year? And then 3 other people go, that's a terrible idea. Why would we ever do this? And then another guy goes, well, look at this pie chart or whatever. Like, these are educated decisions that are made. And yeah, sometimes they don't pay off because sometimes people who work for a gaming company don't get what their fans want. But I think that Sony has proven that, if anything, they get what their fan base wants. I think if anyone doesn't get their fan base necessarily, right now it's Microsoft. And that's an Xbox fanboy saying that. Like, they still don't know I don't know that they know what a typical Xbox gamer is. I think PlayStation knows who their game players are. So we'll see what happens. I'm with you. I'm curious to see. And while you may call them out on it, you don't have to worry about it because the internet will be all over there.
Well, and I think to just try to put a bow on this and move on, because I know we've been talking a long time about news. I think it's just, if you are a PlayStation owner and you're disappointed by this, like, that's okay. You can be disappointed and you can voice your displeasure of like, hey, I own your system. I own these games for your system. I really look forward to you doing an E3 presentation every year. I am really sad that you're not doing E3 this year. I think that's completely, you are more than welcome to do that. You, as a consumer of their product, are welcome to do that. And I know some people said that they really wanted them to say, we're not doing E3, but here's what we're doing instead. I think it's better for them to kind of hold everything close right now and not put out too many expectations, because if they said, oh, we're not going to do a huge E3 stage show, but once a month we're going to do a 30-minute little video of, you know, what's coming up for PlayStation in the next 30 days. Well, how does that sound anywhere near as cool as an E3 stage show? You know, like, I think almost no matter what they announce after that, they're like, well, here's what we're doing instead, is almost inevitably going to sound disappointing.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it's not going to be better in some way as far as the news that they get you. It might be worse too. Like, it might be horrible. We'll have to wait and see. But for me, I'm just interested to see what is going to happen here. And I think one thing we're forgetting about a little bit, or I think a lot of people are forgetting about when they talk about this, yes, does PlayStation sell a lot of games in the United States? Absolutely. Does Xbox sell a ton of games in the United States? Yes. Does PlayStation sell a ton of games around the globe? They totally do. Does Xbox?
No.
Not really. Not
Japan.
really.
Japan kills Xbox.
You know, so when you look at the popularity of the PlayStation, like, their numbers and their sales are because of Europe, South America, Japan, Asia. Like, their presence in China right now is huge. Like, people talked about how there was no PlayStation experience. There were, just not in the US this year.
Right.
So I think that's the thing that people sometimes think about. Is like, well, what about the United States? We're not the only territory that matters to PlayStation.
Correct.
So, you know, and we have some really great games that are still on the horizon that are coming out next year. So do I want to see another trailer for The Last of Us 2 at E3? I mean, I do, but yes. I'll probably be okay without it, because I'm sure somebody will probably just get an arm chopped off or something. So, all right, but that's enough about PlayStation and E3, but we would love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to share them with us on the social media. Send us an email. We would love to hear what you think about PlayStation skipping E3 in 2019. Good move, bad move, what do you think? With that, as promised, we're going to move on to the topic of the show. And while listening to the show, you might have just finished eating a holiday meal with friends or family. Maybe you're getting ready to do a little shopping, or your kids are creating lists for holiday gifts. Maybe you're fortunate enough to get an end-of-the-year bonus and you want to get yourself a little something as a result. Either way, Josh and I are here to help you with a few gaming recommendations or shopping suggestions as we approach the end of the year. To help make this list, we just created a few broad categories, and we're just going to make some suggestions in the categories that we feel like are good fits, or games that we enjoy that kind of fit into this general idea. Most of these will be board games. I think all of mine are board games that I'm going to suggest. We might toss in a video game or two just if we're feeling frisky about it. But to start with, we're going to talk a little bit about folks who are looking maybe to introduce their family to gaming. Like, say you just finished up your Thanksgiving, you all got together, you chatted, you ate your meal, and then you realized you had nothing to do with the rest of your evening. So maybe when you get together for your next holiday, you want to have some games you can play. So Josh, what would you recommend as a game to introduce families to gaming?
It's funny. I've been thinking all week about what to play at Thanksgiving this year. So we're going to have a little bit less people than normal. And last year I made the mistake of giving him a game that was a little heavier than normal. So
oh, gosh.
It's very important for me to make the right decision this year.
And now suddenly your gathering is smaller. I mean, do you think that's related?
Yeah, people literally moved away from the state to get away from my board game choices. So for me, I'm hoping to visit my Barnes & Noble tomorrow because they just recently released Harry Potter Codenames and Harry Potter Munchkin. And I think those are good ways to get them into the theme. So if we take that Harry Potter theme and introduce my family to Munchkin, I think that would be interesting. Plus, I get to experience, 2 new games for myself. So that is something I'm definitely considering. There's a game on your list that I have that I'm considering, but I'll let you what do you think? Are we going to go back and forth, or you just want to go through our lists?
You know what? Why don't you just go through your list? We'll change it up rather than going back and forth. Just take your list away.
All right. So Ice Cool I picked up on the Barnes & Noble clearance sale. And I think that's a game I would like to introduce to the family and learn for myself for the first time. I can use my Cool Dies app to teach me how to use it. So I'd be interested in checking that out. Everyone is pretty adept to board games except for one person, my aunt, who has a very hard time pretty much grasping any game we try to teach her. She couldn't even figure out Family Feud. So we had a tough time last Thanksgiving. So hopefully I'm trying to find that game that I can get her involved with. Even in Codenames, she was saying the word instead of a clue. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, I'm a big Century, Spice Road Century Golem Edition fan. So that would be a game I'd like to introduce him to, as well as I'm hoping to grab the 5 to 6 player expansion for Sagrada, because Sagrada is another game that we introduced to my parents and they really enjoyed. So that would be another game too, and perhaps Villainous will make a appearance at the end of the day, depending on who's sticking around. And I know I'm just using Thanksgiving for my answers for introducing family to gaming, but that's kind of what's going around in my head right now. So those are the games I would pick for that category.
Awesome. So when I was putting together my list, I was trying to think of things that I have either played or have played quite a bit, things that were reasonably affordable as far as gifts go. For the most part, I didn't want to recommend things that were super expensive. And I also tried to recommend things that you can, for the most part, easily buy. There's a couple of these that are maybe a little more complicated to get that you couldn't necessarily just get on Amazon. But for the most part, I was trying to think of things that could easily be found. For the most part, other than one of the other categories, I try to go with things that are a little bit lighter weight. So for family gaming, just the things that I've had success with, or games that I think would be excellent if you haven't picked them up or purchased them or are looking to give a good holiday gift of a family game. Sheriff of Nottingham is one I always go to. Really fun bluffing game, a chance to get people around, get people laughing. And I think the big thing with Sheriff of Nottingham especially is if you have a fun family, Sheriff of Nottingham is a more fun game. This is a game that, depending on who your family is or who you're playing it with in general, makes the game fun or not fun. The mechanics in it make sense, work well, but how you interact with one another is really what sells the game. So if you have a fun, boisterous, outgoing family, this is going to be a great game for them. If you have a family that's maybe a little more reserved or maybe isn't quite as outgoing, maybe this game would help them come out of their shell a little bit and be a little more exuberant, but might not be the best fit unless you think that can help do that. But Sheriff of Nottingham, really great fit. Sometimes people aren't a big fan of a game like this because it is a bluffing game and they worry about, am I teaching my kids to lie and that it's a good thing? I completely understand that. I don't have kids, so I can't, necessarily relate or give parenting advice, because I think that's usually pretty frowned upon when you don't have kids. But I think that, it's a game and it's the context of a game. And I think hopefully that makes it not okay, but you can hopefully kind of explain that, that while playing this game, it is okay to do this thing. So that Sheriff of Nottingham, something I think is really pretty easy to recommend and I enjoy. Another game is a game called Santorini. Mm-hmm. I know I talked about this game back in the day in the podcast. A little abstract strategy game that basically you are building up towers. So you're basically moving your workers and then building a new level either adjacent to where your worker is. Overall, once you build your tower up to the 3rd level and you get a worker up there, you win. Pretty straightforward. So learning the game, not challenging, very, very simple to learn, but actually a little bit just of complexity to actually playing it. And once you get going, you see like how complex, I shouldn't say complex, but how in-depth the strategy really can be in the game. Works well, I think probably 8+, I think is what the game says on the box, but I know a lot of people feel younger kids, like even down to 6, can play this game okay. And I really like it too, because it's not very expensive and has a great table presence. Like, it looks really cool on the table. If you're playing it at a family gathering, people will see it and be like, oh, that looks cool. What are you doing? So I think that's something that's going to bring people over as well. So Santorini, an easy recommendation as far as that goes. Another game in the same vein of what you've talked about already, kind of pulling in the Harry Potter theme with Fantastic Beasts out in theaters now. I think a lot of folks are back on the Harry Potter chain. So if you haven't picked up Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle at this time, really great introduction to deck building games. Again, a game that since they use all the stuff from the films and the art is from the films for the most part, people are going to be able to get into it and recognize it right away. So another easy way to get folks involved into something that they're kind of familiar with. You had already talked about Ice Cool. I think that's another easy recommendation. Really fun, really light game. But again, the box and the board that you create from the box looks very cool. It has a table presence. You're actively flicking things, and it's a dexterity game, so you're getting in there and doing stuff. So I think that's pretty cool. And then the final one I want to recommend just very briefly, because I actually only played it one time. I was lucky enough to win a copy of Arboretum from Renegade on Twitter. Got the game the other day, was able to play it one time. So far, the one game I played of it, I really enjoyed. I've never played it before. This is a reprinting of a game that came out a couple years ago. That basically, it's kind of a hand management set collection tile placement. You're basically building a garden essentially in front of you and trying to create the best path that you can through this garden. And the artwork is very stunning. The game, when you put it on the table, even though it's just cards, looks impressive. And it's kind of just kind of an interesting theme and something that's a little different. So I think for families as well, it's not super complex, but maybe has a little more to it than maybe a totally entry level game. So that would be my other recommendation at this point, Arboretum, which I will talk about more in depth next week. So the next category of games we talked about, we're looking at getting my friend group into gaming. So maybe, you don't just have Thanksgiving. Maybe you have a Friendsgiving. Maybe you have friends that you're going to be getting together with a holiday party, in December sometime. What are some games, Josh, you would recommend either for that or for getting a gift to a friend that you want to encourage them to play some games with you?
Well, if you're doing like a gaming group, the first game that comes to mind that I want to play with my game group is Discover Lands Unknown, which is a game that it's one of the very unique games by, oh my gosh, why am I forgetting Fantasy Flight Games? Oh my goodness. This is a game essentially where every version of the game is different. You get between 5 different land types. Each box has 2 different land types, and out of 36 characters, each box has 12 characters. And everyone's game will be different. Everyone will have different characters in their games. You might have some of the same characters, but essentially this is a game that it plays almost legacy style. You're like exploring a map, and as you start the game, the map tiles are flipped down so you don't know where you're going, and it's like a survival game. You have to survive as a group to get to a certain destination, and it plays in 4 scenarios. that have there's different scenarios in the instruction manuals. So like if you have like desert and mountains, like desert would be like scenarios 1 and 3, mountain would be scenarios 2 and 4. And you can play through that way. And then there's a scenario 5 on both of them, which are just for you to continue playing once you're done playing the scenarios. You just play it as a regular base game. That's definitely been on the radar. Something I want to introduce to my friends, actually 2 games. Photosynthesis is one. So far, I've only played it with my wife. If you've been listening to our podcast since forever ago, I'm pretty keen on this game. I really enjoy it a lot, and I really enjoy the theme. So it's something I want to introduce to more people, as well as Mystic Vale as a game that only my wife and I have played together. And we played with some strangers at PAX Unplugged last year. But it's kind of a game that I would categorize it as sitting on my shelf of shame, because I have 2 expansions we haven't played yet, and we haven't actually played it in this house together. And it's an incredible game, and it's a game that gets people familiar with what they call the card crafting system, but it's essentially similar to a deck builder for people who have played deck builders. It's like a card enhancing deck builder where you're strengthening the cards in your hand. And the last game I'll list is in the same system. It's called Custom Heroes. It's also done by AEG Games. And it is a trick-taking game where you can manipulate the cards in your hand to make them higher, lower, stronger, special abilities. And you're playing against multiple people. And again, it's only a game I played with my wife with people that we didn't know. So it's a game I would love to get to the table with my gaming group and introduce them to. And an honorable mention to Dice Throne, because Dice Throne Season 2 I am expecting in a month from Kickstarter. And this is a game you can go into Barnes & Noble and pick up. It's a fantastic game. The art is incredible in this game. I was lucky enough to meet one of the artists and get my box signed by him. But they're going to have another huge presence at PAX Unplugged with Season 2. Ironically, they'll probably be selling Season 2 there before I get my copy at home. But I can't complain because I bought Dice Throne at PAX last year, and the people who backed it haven't gotten it yet either. So, that's just how the universe works. But Dice Throne is a competitive dice rolling deck building-ish game. It's like everyone plays like a stereotypical RPG character, kind of. And you have a board in front of you, and you have powers, and you are upgrading your powers throughout the game to make your attacks stronger, your defense stronger, by rolling dice. It's like a press your luck style game. So I'm a really big fan of that too, and I want to play that more often, and I would highly recommend it.
Awesome. So I think an important thing to keep in mind here is obviously there's a lot of, mainstream or well-known games that we're not talking about. And that's mostly just because like the pandemics, the Catans, Ticket to Rides, like we've talked about a lot. So I was trying to look for some different games. So other games for me that I put for looking for friends that you're looking to get into gaming, whether it be giving as a gift, or, trying to, encourage friends who have come over. Couple that I want to talk about. One is a game called Takenoko. I think I've mentioned this briefly in the past on the podcast. But Takenoko is a really cool game, mostly because I like animals a lot. And in this, you are trying to take care of a giant panda bear. And you're doing that by cultivating land plots, irrigating them, growing bamboo, feeding the panda bear. Like, it's just a fun, cool game, and it's a really unique theme. And I'm a big fan I really enjoy theme. Again, it's a lighter weight game. It's not very challenging to learn, but it has, a really cool table presence. The bamboo actually grow up vertically as you irrigate them. And it's just a really cool looking game. So I'm a big fan of Takenoko. I think that is an easy recommendation for friends that you're looking to get in. The next one is going to be a game called Cult Express. And again, a game I've mentioned briefly on this podcast in the past. I don't know why, but recently I've really had a thing for dexterity games. I've played a lot more of them than I used to, and Cult Express fits into that. Actually, totally, I think it is not Colt Express right there. For Colt Express, it's the game where you're basically trying to take over a train, and you have different characters that you're going through. I was totally thinking of Dice Town.
Thinking of Flick 'em Up.
Yeah, Flick 'em Up. Thank you. I was like, for Colt Express, you are basically trying to rob a train, and you have a set of cards that, and the cool thing that I like about Colt Express is the fact that, every round you are trying to remember exactly, like with the program movement, what am I going to do versus what are the other people on the train going to do? Because you might try to shoot someone who's a car with you in the same car as you, but then, oh gosh, are they going to play a movement card before I'm going to play my shoot card? And then if they play that, what am I going to do instead of this? And trying to kind of figure out how that program movement is going to work. But some of the cards are placed down upside down. Some of them are placed, where suddenly you're going to be doing 2 cards in a row versus rather than one, like going around in a circle to play your movements. And it's just a really fun, engaging game because a lot of ridiculous things happen in it. And this is a game, I think the more people you have in it, it plays up to 6 players. The more people who are in the game, the more fun this game is. Playing Colt Express with 2 players is not all that enjoyable to me. But when you get up to that 6 players, when the ridiculous things are happening, when people's movements are all over the place and it's just messing every plan up, the game is so much more fun. So Colt Express, really easy thing to recommend if you have are just looking to kind of try a program movement or a hidden movement game of that. It's not really hidden movement, but a programming game to a degree, and looking for a lot of player interaction. This is going to be a really good and fun one to get into. The next one I'm going to talk about really briefly is Alhambra. If you have friends who are going to be maybe a little more chill, a little more thoughtful, Alhambra is going to be a really great way to kind of get into that. You are basically bidding on pieces to build your Alhambra. So you're trying to build a structure in front of you out of little pieces. And as you build it, there you have rules that you have to follow, that like walls can't touch walls have to back up to walls, and you have to be able to walk to every single piece of your Alhambra. So you have to ensure that everything connects okay. And basically on your turn, you're deciding whether you're going to take money or bid on pieces to try to get them, or I should say purchase pieces to try to get them. So it's one of those games that the first time I saw it, I thought it looked really underwhelming. The art in it is pretty underwhelming. It's a Queen game, and Queen games kind of all look the same. Mm-hmm. And they're not the best looking games that are out there. But this game is really fun. It's one of the first games I ever got into, or when I started playing, designer hobby board games. And it's a game that I still regularly play. It's a little bit harder to find, interestingly enough, right now. I think you can get like the base box like on Amazon, but there's a big box version of it, which can't seem to find very well right now. But still definitely worth picking up if you can find it. And that's Alhambra. The last game I want to talk about is a game I have only played one time. And I don't have it in my collection, but I want to get it in my collection. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And that's a game called Burgle Bros. It's actually a cooperative game. So if you have friends or, you've heard a lot about like Pandemic and those other cooperative games, Burgle Bros might be just slightly more complicated, but in it basically is a cooperative game where you're trying to pull off a robbery in a really secure building. So you are moving on the floors. Every floor has a safe to crack, and you're trying to move from first floor to second floor to third floor, cracking all the safes along the way and eventually escaping to the roof to get out. There are obviously guards that are involved in it as well that are trying to catch you. But this is a game, again, that's going to have a really awesome table presence because you do have a 3-story building in essence on the tabletop. So it's a really cool looking game and has a really awesome presence. And it's just a different cooperative game than the usuals that you'll find out there of like Pandemic and things like that for getting your friends in. So if curing diseases doesn't seem like something your friends want to do, maybe they want to rob a high rise. And if that sounds like your friends, Burgle Bros might be a good fit. This is going to be a game that's going to be a little more challenging to get as well. Is a Tim Fowers design, and he tends to sell most of his games just through the gaming website from Fowers Games. But I believe they have free shipping on everything. So it's not like you're really out anything. And I think you can get it maybe through Amazon as well. But it redirects, I think, just to Fowers Games. So just be aware. Not going to be something that you can necessarily like go to Cool Stuff or something like that and pick up necessarily. So Burgle Bros, that is the other game I would recommend. Josh, if somebody's looking for a little bit of a smaller game, something maybe to fit in a stocking, what would you potentially recommend?
Well, I'm going to do a blind recommendation first, something I haven't played. I'm going to recommend Keyforge, which is all the rave, one of those two words right now in the gaming industry. So essentially, Keyforge is a CCG collectible card game. You can think of it as Magic if you want to make it more understandable, but you're not building a deck like you do in Magic. When you buy your deck in Keyforge, you get a standard deck that you don't edit, you don't alter. You just play with the cards in your deck. So for $10, if you don't buy the starter set, if you buy the starter set, the 2-player starter set, it's $40. So you get 4 decks and like tokens and everything that you need to play. But if you just want to buy a regular deck, it's $10. It'll fit perfectly in a stocking. And you can just buy 2 and then you have 2 decks to play. You just play them against each other. You practice, you try to master that deck. And if it's something that you like, awesome. If you don't like it, you're out $10. You could probably sell it because people are buying these things up like crazy because they're all unique. So that's definitely a game I would recommend. Another game I would recommend would be Roll For It, which is another small box game. And essentially what you're doing is you're laying out 3 cards at a time. And these cards have pictures of dice on them and scores. And everyone, I think it's up to 5 to 6 players. They take turns rolling their dice they have in their hand. Each person has different color dice. And then after you roll, you're taking your dice and you're placing them on the card that you want to score. So say a card has 3 1s on it. You can place a 1 die on there. Or if you roll 2 1s, you can put 2 of your 1s on there. But then everyone else gets a turn and people could potentially also try to score that card. And if they do get 3 1s before you do, your dice are returned to you and that person gets that victory point. And the game continues to a certain amount of points. It's very fun. It has some strategy because you have to decide where you want to put your dice, but mostly it's luck, which is fine. I would recommend the Unlock games that you can find. These are the essentially escape room games that are very popular. You can find those relatively cheap at GameStop on clearance. They're like $8. What else would I say? Sushi Go we've talked about before. That's an easy recommendation. And I'm going to go with Flip City. Flip City is a game I really enjoy that people don't talk about too much. It's another small game. And basically you're competing against your opponent. If you played Machikoro, it has a little bit of Machikoro elements to it. But you set up this, like, we'll call it a cityscape of cards. And in the name itself, in Flip City, there's also a location on the flip side of the card that is essentially more valuable. And you're drawing cards and playing cards. And as you play them, some cards have frowny faces on them. And if you get too many frowny faces, you lose your turn, essentially negating any progress you've made on your turn. So it's a push your luck style game where you're constantly wondering, should I flip another card? Should I flip another card? Do I remember how many frowny faces I have in my deck? And you can put cards in someone else's hand to alter that as well. It's a fun, easy game to learn and an easy game to play. Something that's easily travelable with as well. So those are what I would put in your stocking.
Awesome.
So to speak.
Very cool. So games I would recommend for stocking. One of them is being Red 7. Red 7 is a really straightforward card game, 2 to 4 players. And basically how the game works is you're dealt a hand of cards and you have to play a card on your turn. And at the end of your turn, you must be winning the game. Otherwise, if you aren't winning the game, you are out. And you might say, well, that doesn't make any sense. How are you winning the game? Well, there's 7 colors of cards in Red 7, and each of those colors of cards has a different rule on them. So when you play a card, that is the card, or that rule is what is kind of in effect, right? So red is the highest card wins. So Red 7 is the highest card. And then like I said, there's 7 colors, and the colors are ranked like in Roy G. Biv order. So red is the highest, color, if you would, and violet is the lowest color. But then, yellow is most cards of one color wins. Green, most even cards win. Indigo's like most cards in a row wins. So as you're playing your cards, whenever you play, you have to be winning at the end of your turn, but you only get to play one card per turn. So really straightforward to learn. Fun little game, easily fits in the stocking. So that's red 7. Another one that's a very small game that fits well in the stocking and comes with lots of versions is a really simple game called Love Letter. This was all the rage a few years ago, and as a result, there is a number of varieties of Love Letter out there. But basically, you are trying to, in the traditional version of the game, you are trying to get your love letter to the princess, and you do that by, on your turn, you draw a card and you play a card. So you always have one card in your hand, you draw up to 2 cards, and then you play one of those 2 cards. And you do whatever the action on that card is. It might have you reveal a card, or you and your neighbor share, what cards you have, and whoever has the lowest card is out. It might have you exchange cards with someone. And the goal is that at the end, after everyone has played their cards, whoever has the card closest to the princess gets a point, and then you play the whole thing over again. So I really enjoyed Love Letter. It's a game I actually regularly take with me if I'm going on to a conference or a meeting for work. It's something that I'll throw in my bag because it fits in there really easily. And it's very simple to teach, very fun to play. And it is a really great stocking stuffer. Another game I wanted to go ahead and mention is a game called Shot and Totten. This game is quite a bit older. I think it came out initially in the 90s, but it's still in print today quite often. You can still get it. 2-player game, but basically you have 9 stones that are in the middle of the table, and you're just kind of playing poker-like hand formations, for lack of a better word, in front of these stones. And if you have the better hand in front of that stone, you win that stone. That's pretty much all you're trying to do. So it's a really straightforward game, but there's definitely a little bit of depth to it. There's some hand management to it, and you're trying to, like I said, collect these stones. It's a fun game that I don't think gets talked about probably as often, maybe because it's a 2-player only game. But if you're looking for something to maybe give to a significant other, or somebody maybe that you regularly play games with at work or want to play games with at work, Shot and Totten is going to be a good one. And then the other one that I would say that's a good stocking stuffer is Hanabi, which is a game I've definitely talked about before. But just as a brief reminder, a cooperative game where you're trying to make a really fancy fireworks show. But the interesting thing is you know what cards everyone else has, but you don't know what cards you have. So you hold your cards face out the entire game, and you can only give general clues to each other as to what cards are in your hand. And you're trying to make piles of cards from, I think, 1 to 7. I believe is what it is, or maybe 1 to 5. I can't quite remember. But anyway, you're making these piles up, and of the cards in order so all the blue cards are in one pile, and they're in number order. So again, a game that I really enjoy playing, really simple to teach, small box game, easily fits in a stocking. That is Hanabi. All right, Josh, so if people have already been playing games and maybe want to take the next step, or they just want to jump in the deep end and take on a game that's maybe a little meatier, what would you recommend as a potential good gift? Okay,
so there's I think Lords of Waterdeep is a good next level game. Although you could consider it an entry level game as well. I think it adds a little bit more complexity than a basic game people play. So Lords of Waterdeep is partial people mover, partial deck builder. It has the Dungeons and Dragons name on it. It's definitely just in name alone, so don't let that scare you away. But essentially, you have I think you start with 2 meeples, but you can work your way up to, I think, 4 or 5 total. As you're playing through the game, there's locations in Waterdeep that you can occupy. Some will only let one person occupy them. Some let multiple people. And each location you go to, you'll be doing different things. Some locations you can get gold. Some locations you can secure the first player for the next turn spot. Some locations you can get cards. And essentially you're competing with the other players that have the most victory points at the end of the game. There's an expansion to it, which I haven't played. But it's definitely a very fun game. It was pretty easy to learn once we got going. So I'd say that's definitely a good next level game. On the flip side, if you want to jump into the deep end, Shadows over Camelot is a game that I would argue is harder than people say it is. There's definitely a lot of strategy, and it adds that thing that Kyle loves in games. It adds 1 to potentially 2 traders into this game, where you are Knights of the Round Table, and you are fighting off pike and pikes and something. I can't remember the name of the other invading armies. You're fighting off 2 invading armies. You're also interacting with the Lady in the Lake or Morgana. You're fighting off siege catapults that are happening no matter what, and you're working together. At least you hope you're working together to manage all these things that are happening at the same time. Meanwhile, if there is a traitor, that traitor is subtly trying to steer you off your path to victory. The game is either won or lost by swords filling up the round table in the center of the board. If there are more black swords, then I can't remember the color of the good guy swords, maybe white, the bad guys will win, and vice versa. It's definitely a fun, tough, strategic game. And then the last game I'll mention in this category for next step or deep end, this could be considered both. That would be Small World. Small World is a very interesting game. I don't know that we've seen another game do what Small World does. Essentially, when you start Small World, you're drafting a race, and I want to say subclass. That might be the wrong term for it. But you could have troll wizards, or where they have the ability. You have a race that has the ability of a certain subgenre class, and you're vying for territory of this map. Think Risk style. However, if your race is ever destroyed, you can then draft a new race, and you kind of do it in the way some games work, where you pay to get a further race down the list. So if you're looking at the 5th race that you want, you have to pay money onto the 1, 2, 3, and 4 spot above it to continue that. It's very great, very good. The art is very unique and very comical. There's a heck of a lot of expansions for the game that add way more races and abilities. It's a game I don't get to the table enough, but it is very fun, and it's definitely, I would say, a next step game.
Awesome. My next step games, or heavier games, if you want to kind of jump in the deep end, one of them is a game called Clank. Clank is a deck building game that has a board, and it has you going down into the depths to collect treasure in an effort to get back out before you wake the dragon, who is going to burn you to a crisp. The thing I really enjoy this is there's definitely some press your luck to it. Like I said, there's deck building to it, and there's also player elimination. You can just die and not be able to win this game, which I think doesn't happen very often in games anymore. But the cool thing is it happens right at the end, so you still get to play the whole game, but maybe then you just don't get to win it. So I really enjoy Clank. There's also Clank in Space. So if you're looking for a more sci-fi theme, you'd probably want to go with Clank in Space. But if you're looking for the more traditional fantasy theme, Clank is going to be a great fit. Another game I'm going to recommend is Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Between Castles of Mad King Ludwig just came out. But I haven't played that yet, so I don't know how good it is. So I'm just going to still recommend Castles of Mad King Ludwig at this point. Really cool game that has you building a castle for the Mad King. And I like this game because it's an auction game and a bidding game that you don't see all that often. So you have basically some special considerations that you need to keep in mind for your building. And then there's some general things that everyone needs to keep in mind when trying to build their building to get the most points possible. And then you are just using your resources to bid on the next pieces in order to try to build the best castle you can for the Mad King, to get the most points. So like I said, Castles of Mad King Ludwig, really fun game, really cool, really unique. And it's fun because every time you play, it's a little bit different, since pieces might come out in different orders. The fact of there's the mind games of trying to figure out how much you're going to bid on things or how much you can bid on things based off what other people are trying to do. And like I said, there is that re-implementation between two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. And there's also the Palace of Mad King Ludwig. But I'm going still with the old tried and true Castles of Mad King Ludwig. So that's what I would recommend there. If you want to start getting a little bit heavier and more complicated, Five Tribes is a game that I've talked about before that I really, really enjoy. Five Tribes is an area control game that has basically, you are picking up almost like a Moncala style system where you pick up all the meeples that are on one particular place, you move them, around the board, and then when you end, you have to end with the last color meeple you have in your hand. Also has to have another meeple on that space. You pick up all the ones of the same color, and whatever those colors refer to, you get to do. Sometimes they're just straight points. Sometimes they might assassinate other meeples. Sometimes they might let you activate gins or buy gins that you can get in the game. So it's really trying to figure out, okay, which group of meeples off of what piece do I want to pick up? How can I move them to get them to a color where I can maximize the number of meeples I get to get? And it's also going to be a strategy that I'm going for in order to try to really maximize the points I have and to try to further implement, whatever method of trying to collect points in the games that you have gone through. It's designed by Bruno Catala, so a really well-known designer. But Five Tribes is a game that I regularly come back to, and I definitely would recommend. And the final game, if you want to get really meaty, is a Euro game called Great Western Trail. I did review this once on the podcast in the early days. Great Western Trail is a really heavy strategy game. If you look at it on Board Game Geek, it is like a top 10 game of all time on there, but it's also a very heavy game that is on there. And it involves, you are trying to sell your cattle. You are trying to move them from your ranch to the train and send them to a city to be sold, and just repeating that process over and over. So it sounds a little interesting because it's all about kind of point-to-point movement. But there's also some set collection involved with it. You're trying to build up your pool of cards and things that you have. You're also building buildings and all these other things kind of along the way to try to maximize not only how far you can send your cows, because the farther you send them, the more points you can get, but also the speed with which you can get through the trail and all these other things. So Great Western Trail, really fun game. It's one of those things that you hear the theme and you're like, how can it possibly be fun? But it's actually a really great time. Definitely recommend Great Western Trail. So the final category tonight, Josh, what are just some games that are really fun that you think people should check out and that you would encourage people to gift to one another?
So I'm just going to list some things. I won't necessarily explain them because I think we've talked about them a bunch. The obvious first thing I would say is everyone knows how much I love the Century series. So Century Spice Road, Century Golem Edition, these are interchangeable, but it's a game I feel like people should play, at least, if not own. Ticket to Ride, I think if you don't have it already, you should own some version of Ticket to Ride. Seven Wonders is a game you should own if you're a board game player. I was just looking at it and I blanked. The Big Book of Madness, I think, is a great game to have. It's not expensive. It's produced so well. The art is incredible. I'm just really high on that game, even though I'm very apparently terrible at that game. Potion Explosion is another great one. And Machikoro came into my life this year, and I really think that is an excellent must-own game, at least some version of it. Very simple, yet not. Like, it's deceivingly not a simple game. And if I'm going to throw in like a CCG, Star Wars Destiny is a great game. If you're into the Star Wars verse, it's definitely something you should check out. It's affordable to get into. You know, $20 gets you 2-player starter set. And then any of the Legendary games, like Legendary Marvel, any of those expansions or Ascension. All those games are great games that are great. Like you says, games that are just great. Those are those games.
Very cool. The few that I'm going to recommend, again, all these I think are definitely games I've talked about on the podcast in the past, so I'm not necessarily going to go into it a ton, but Scythe, I think, is still one of those games that it's easily sits kind of in my top 5 games. I really enjoy playing Scythe, so that's an easy recommend. Time Stories I really love, mostly because it's a system that's very interesting, and there's a ton of expansions that are out for it at this point. But I really enjoy it's a very unique experience. Every story is unique. The problem solving that you do is unique, and it's just a cool, especially if you can get similar people together to play the expansions. Time Stories is great. Get Everdell, which I talked about really recently. I am still in love with this game. It's kind of tough to find right now, but if you can get your hands on a copy of Everdell, I think most people are going to be really happy with it. I highly recommend that game. Stuff Fable is something that we've talked about a ton, but I still, we just finished it up not that long ago, and I think it's something that is a really good time. It's a really easy to recommend. Really happy with the times I've spent with Stuff Fables. And of course, I'm going to recommend it because I always recommend it for every time we do anything, and that's Dead of Winter. I love Dead of Winter. I can play that game every day. It's so much fun. I just absolutely adore it. So, hey, those are our shopping guide for you for 2018 when it comes to board games, some recommendations, and maybe some things to look at picking up for those folks in your life who might be interested in games, or maybe you want to get more interested in games. We're getting a little long in the tooth, but we'd be remiss if we didn't answer the questions from our wonderful listeners. So, Josh, why don't you take this part away?
All right. So we do have a few listener questions and thoughts to cover. Remember, you can hit us up at boardwithvg or at the email address boardwithvg@gmail.com. Or you can jump in the Discord. Like, we have a question from our Discord. So our first question from Twitter, question and statement, is from Spleg, of course, at They're Delicious. Category, 2-player games, Fox and Forest, and question mark. So let's address that part first. So for me, I'm going to say Fox and the Forest and Seven Wonders Duel. What do you think for the second one?
Man, so you totally stole Seven Wonders Duel. That's fine. I did talk about Shot and Totten already. So Shot and Totten would be a good fix or a good pick, I think. Like I said, you said Seven Wonders Duel. I'm going to go also with Star Realms.
Yes.
Pretty solid 2-player game. I'm going to throw out Hive as a pretty stellar 2-player game. I actually haven't played that game in a while now that I think about it, but I really enjoy it.
I'll say Kodama.
Oh, yeah. Kodama's a good one. Targi is another good 2-player game. And then the last one I can think of off the top of my head would be Hanamakoji, which is a really good 2-player game. If you can find that as well. Hanamakoji is a good 2-player game.
Yes, and I would throw in Odin's Ravens, a game I'm a very big fan of. That's by Osprey Games. I will say I don't know that I've seen it in very many stores. You might have to look online for that. Okay, that's your 2-player games. So he continues. Do you like pumpkin pie or clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, custard pie? I don't know if those are all included in the custard pie. That's a lot of things to be included in a custard pie. I'm going to say a no to all of those.
You don't like pumpkin pie?
I do not like pumpkin pie. I'm a one and done kind of pie guy. And that's apple pie.
Gotcha. I mean, apple is pretty delicious.
Just a regular, generic white dude.
I do like pumpkin pie. I'm trying to figure out if he is trying to imply that pumpkin pie is just clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, custard pie.
That's funny.
That's what I'm trying to figure out if that's what he's trying to imply. But yeah, I like pumpkin pie a lot.
Yes. I'm not a fan of most pumpkin things. But that's okay. What are you looking forward to the most on your Thanksgiving table? Splig has enjoyed smoking a turkey the last few years. So let's answer that one first. What are you most looking forward to on your turkey table?
The board games I'm playing after.
Okay, he didn't say food, so...
He didn't. I will say, though, if it came to food, though, it would definitely be the stuffing cooked outside of the turkey.
Okay. That was very specific. I am a big stuffing fan, so I often look forward to the stuffing at Thanksgiving dinner. All right, and how to deal with the in-laws, family, when they're in town. I'm going to attempt some games, but last time I went over like a lead balloon, but I will try again, he says. And I admire that because I won't even touch board games as a topic with my in-laws. They all think I'm a nerd. None of them are interested in board games. They are all jocks. They couldn't be less interested in my hobby. So I leave them to their thing. Luckily, on Thanksgiving, I don't see the in-laws. On Easter, I don't see the in-laws. I just have to see them. Sorry, I get to see them on Christmas Eve, and we watch football, and I'm okay with that.
All right. So I am not seeing. Thanksgiving actually is usually just the wife and I. We usually don't go anywhere for Thanksgiving. So I don't really have to worry about that at all, actually. So
we get an open invitation if you ever are in Worcester.
Okay, that sounds great. So how do I deal with them? I deal with them by not having to.
That's the best way. Great. Okay, I hope we answered some of your questions, Splig. Hey, Splig, I got a question for you. Where was your submission to the Guardians contest? I'll look forward to your reply on Twitter. Seth is the GOAT. Seth from the PSXP podcast, on Discord. Seth Roy, if you're nasty, is that what we say? He simply had a statement of a question. Good Christmas themed board games. And I to that question, I'd say no.
Yeah, I don't think there is a good one.
There are a few North Pole themed board games.
Yeah, there's some related stuff.
I have not played them, and I have not heard good things about them. I would say don't go to a board game for theme necessarily. Let the theme come to you. Like don't go out looking for Easter themes or Christmas themes in board games. If it happens to have a Christmas theme, you'll hear that it's a good game before you hear that it's a Christmas themed board game, I think.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's really a good, I think there's like a holiday version of Flux.
Yeah, there.
Maybe, I think. But other than
Zombie Flux, is that the Christmas one?
Yes, Josh, that clearly. But I think there is a holiday version of Flux, I think. But other than that, I'm just thinking of games that have snow. There's the snow. There's that snow expansion for Carcassonne.
Winter.
Yeah. Oh, Dead of Winter. And then Snowtails. It has dogs and snow, so that's great.
Snowtails. I have a Winter's Tale game, but that's mostly Fable characters.
Yeah,
not necessarily.
But I don't think there is a good Christmas themed board game at all. I don't think one exists. So there you go, Seth. If you want to put your name on the board game map, make a good Christmas themed board game.
Yep, there you go. Sounds simple as that.
Awesome. Well, hey, as always, we love when you write into us. If you do have other questions in the future, reach out to us on Twitter, reach out to us on Discord. Let us know what you want us to talk about. As we wrap up the show, we are clearly a gaming podcast, but we want to give you a recommendation, suggestion, thing we are into that is helping us live a well-rounded life. More often than not, this will not be board game related or video game related, but just something else that we're into and something that we're enjoying spending time doing currently. So, Josh, what is your recommendation for a well-rounded life?
I'll say this. My wife and I watched Kyle's recommendation for a well-rounded life last week. Dear Zachary, I have an admission to make. So when Kyle told me about this movie and I read the description on Amazon, I thought the description spoiled the movie for me. And I'm going to tell you how I read the description. I won't tell you what it said because it's important for you to understand what I read.
Okay.
I read, and I'm paraphrasing my own thoughts. This guy sets out to make a documentary about his friend's son after his friend dies, only to later find out that he is the father of the son. So I'm watching this entire documentary waiting, and I'm like, how is this going to be possible?
How would you not know?
What are they going to drop on me in this documentary that reveals to me this crazy plot twist? And I'm watching my wife, and I'm like, she's saying I have no idea. And that never happened. So I think it emotionally took me out of the movie. Because I cry at the drop of a hat. I really do. I cried just today replaying to my wife Kevin Smith's thoughts on Stan Lee from his podcast. Even though I had already heard it, I cried again. I did not. The movie is very good. It's very emotional. It's very twisty and turny. But when the inevitable plot twist happens, I was not fazed because I thought for sure this was not the plot twist I'm waiting for. But I turned to look at my wife, and she was She lost her mind. She was crying. And our ongoing joke in the relationship is she didn't cry at our wedding. She never cries. I'm the crier. So, and of course, I started like just destroying her, making fun of her.
Being so supportive. Such a supportive husband.
And she doesn't know that I sent Kyle a video of her crying, but I did. Just to show that happened. So I recommend you checking it out if you want to see a very powerful documentary, and something good does come out of it in the end, and it was great. So you know what my suggestion for a well-rounded life is: take advice from your friends.
Oh, all right.
Just regardless, you can interpret that as you want, but I took Kyle's advice and I watched a documentary that actually made me think a little bit differently for a little bit, and I really am glad I watched it. So it doesn't have to be a movie or a TV show or whatever, but the next time one of your friends gives you some advice, take it.
All right. Well, this is tough then to follow this up, because now I'm going to recommend something and people might hate it. So I'm going to recommend another movie. This is not a documentary this time. I really struggle with recommending this movie, though, because anyone who knows me when it comes to movies,
I'm surprised you're recommending this.
What, really?
Because of your love for animals.
Well, yeah, this is where I struggle because I like animals a lot, but I also, not that things have to be historically accurate all the time, but when things are like blatantly not accurate, I struggle with it sometimes. Like, I'm okay with like movies that are like inspired by a story so that it's going to like, oh, this is obviously dramatized or things are changed. But when something is like not at all the way it was, I have a hard time with it. However, the music in this movie is so amazing. I couldn't help but like be enraptured the entire time I watched it. I absolutely fell in love with it, even though I didn't want to. I didn't go see it in the theater because I was like, no, this movie is dumb and stupid. And it's like, rose-colored putting on rose-colored glasses for everything. No way. And then I finally watched it on video and I was like, oh my gosh, this was like, I was actively trying not to like it. And I mean,
most people aren't a fan of the Human Centipede. I'm really surprised you're recommending it.
So the movie that I'm recommending after all that bit of build-up is The Greatest Showman, about P.T. Barnum, very loosely about P.T. Barnum at best. But yeah, it was if you enjoy musicals, like it is a musical, you have to enjoy those. I don't think this is going to win someone over who's a musical fan. But I really enjoyed my time with the movie, and it, like I said, it gave me some pause because I am someone who typically tries to, I like to think a little bit about like what media says and what movies say and what they're expressing and as the person I am, what does it mean for me to go and sit and watch a movie and not have to face any of the identities that I have or anything like that? Like, I try to think about those things. But The Greatest Showman, the music's really good. Hugh Jackman makes me mad because the guy can do everything. He can sing, he can dance, and he's Wolverine. Like, how is that even remotely fair? And he's a really good looking dude. Like, how is this fair? Like, why does one guy get to do all of those things? But yeah, so The Greatest Showman, I really enjoyed it. I've been listening to the soundtrack for like the last 2 weeks since I watched it. Definitely recommend it. So, Josh, what would you say? What do you say, sir? Should we call it a night? I am clearly tired. I think we should wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm exhausted, man. I gotta be up shortly for work tomorrow. Already. Thanks for joining us as usual, everyone. Remember, you can find us on social media. That's at BoardWithVG on all the social medias. Use that hashtag BoardWithVG. Let us know what you're up to. Facebook.com/BoardWithVG, and oh boy, that elusive, no one can seem to catch it, boardwithvg@gmail.com. It's out there, it's waiting. In lieu of my plugs this week, I'm going to remind everyone, a week from when you're hearing this, I will be in Philadelphia at PAX Unplugged. If you guys have any questions you want me to ask game publishers, designers, people that will be there, please tweet at me or DM me, and I will do my best to ask them these questions. I am there on my own time. I'm not there in any Board with Video Games PSVG capacity. That being said, I'm there to have fun, but if I can squeeze in some interviews and some work for us, I'm going to try to do that. I did find out Jerry Hawthorne is going to be there. So if you guys have your Mice and Mystics film questions you want me to ask, shoot me something. And, if I can't ask them in person, I will make sure at least I get their contact info so I can at least get some answers. But that's it. A week from when you hear this, I'm going to be in Philadelphia at PAX Unplugged. That is exciting. So Thanksgiving, you take a back seat. Kyle, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm not jealous at all. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, Board Game Geek, all at Psychocross, CYCOCROSS. Just remember, last week we announced another giveaway. To send an email, boardwithvg@gmail.com. Who do you think from the 6 nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards is going to win? You don't have to get it right. You just have to submit to us, boardwithvg@gmail.com. Who do you think from the 6 nominees for Game of the Year is going to win? Every single person who enters will be entered into a drawing to win a prize. So just hit us up, boardwithvg@gmail.com, with who you think is going to win. If you have suggestions for future topics, be sure to reach out to us on social media, because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. And remember, everyone, whether it be board games or video games, never stop gaming.